Hey guys, welcome back to Gamers Xtreme. This is podcast episode 2. I'm your host Marcello, and with me as always is my co-host Anthony.
Great to be back, guys.
So we got plenty of things to talk about today. So first things first though, let's just go over just a few games or a game we might be playing right now or currently playing. So Anthony, what are you currently playing right now?
I am playing for the 100th time Resident Evil 4. This is literally maybe the 150th time I've played this game, and this is the new updated remaster version. Yes. And I'm loving it. Definitely enjoying it. Definitely the remaster we should have gotten on the PS3 360 generation. But this is 1080p, 60 frames, and it's a lot of fun to play, and it definitely makes it feel like it's the first time, the way it looked back in 2005 when we first laid our eyes on it.
Definitely. And same here. I've been playing Resident Evil 4 again, and it's definitely the remaster that we were looking for in terms of what we didn't get last generation. So That being said, the game does play as fantastic as it did back in 2005. And yeah, no, hands down, no question. It's still a masterpiece in gaming 11 years later, and it still feels and plays like a masterpiece the way it did in 2005.
Absolutely.
So awesome. So yeah, I guess that's basically what we're playing right now at the moment. I mean, I don't know, Anthony, any other games you're currently playing?
At the moment, no. I'm waiting for a few future titles, but right now I'm actually focused into Resident Evil 4.
Always a good thing to be focused on.
Absolutely.
It says a lot when you can keep replaying a game from 2005 versus a lot of the games that come out nowadays, doesn't it?
Yes, there'll be a whole podcast on that.
So that being said, a couple things that were going on this week, game news-wise. September 7th was kind of a big day.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
First off, well, even though it's going to be in reverse order in terms of their unveilings, first thing we're going to talk about is the PS4 Pro, a.k.a. the Big Mac.
Triple decker,
whatever you want to call it. We're going to discuss it, what it's all about, and what it's really going to mean. Right. So, Anthony, we saw that the Sony showed off their PS4 Pro and their PS4 Slim this Tuesday.
Right.
And honestly, what were your thoughts on? Well, the Slim. I mean, we've already discussed our thoughts. We knew it was real weeks ago.
Right.
They didn't even bother playing it off at the conference. They made it sound like they just kind of wanted to rush through it. But that being said, PS4 Pro was the thing that people wanted to see. They wanted to know what it was about and what they could expect out of this 4K console, or update rather. So, Anthony, what are your thoughts on it?
Thoughts in the conference as a whole, or just the individual items that were presented?
Let's talk about the individual items presented.
Sure. I think, firstly, I was pretty surprised. We all saw the PS4 Slim leaked weeks ago. We all touched on that in the last podcast, so I won't rehash what we mentioned there. You could definitely check it out. I was surprised that the PS4 Slim is not the PS4 Slim. In other words, Sony's presenting that as just the PlayStation 4. So in other words, production will stop on the traditional PlayStation 4 model that most of us have, and that PS4 Slim has replaced the traditional PS4. So I don't think Sony's going to be marketing that as the Slim. It's going to be just known as the PlayStation 4, because that's going to be the only regular PS4 around in the next couple of years. That was surprising to me. I thought this would have been more like the way Microsoft was doing with the S model, and then you have the regular model. One was going to be a Slim, one was going to be the regular, but no, Sony's, I think, going to focus on making the Slim its main console for the baseline. And then you had the PS4 Pro. And the PS4 Pro, I was surprised at the design, to be honest. That I was surprised. I thought it was going to be a lot more intuitive and kind of sleek and imaginative, the way the PS4 was. Because the PS4, I've praised the design up and down. I really liked that design a lot. I loved it, especially coming from the last iterations of the PS3 Slims. It was refreshing to see a nice, sleek design. But the PS4 Pro, I understand there's a lot of specs. They had a pack in it. It just, to me, it should have had a little bit more of a 2016 design or edge to it that I'm just not seeing. Skipping past the design, though, I knew Sony was going to jump into the 4K gaming arena this year. I just always had that feeling. I think it was very risky trying to do the VR headset and the Pro at the same time, because you're talking about almost $1,000 worth of items to release within 30-day window of each other, 60-day window of each other. So that's kind of risky to me. And I guess if you have the money and you could get a 4K TV, but not just any 4K TV, they're specifically telling you should be having a 4K HDR, really 55 inches or better. Sony said 60 inches, but it's a very pricey market right now. And for some that could afford it, it's great. For the mass market, I doubt it at this point. So I think it's still too premature for many of us who can't afford a Pro plus a VR headset, if you even want that, plus a 4K HDR 60-inch TV. It's a very pricey proposition at this point, and I don't see the need for it. In the future, absolutely. But my feeling after watching the conference was they didn't really present it well, and I think that was pretty much agreed across the board. There wasn't an excitement there.
No.
And it definitely felt like Sony of old. And I don't mean old as in the great days of the PS1, PS2. It felt like that kind of PS3 era where it was just kind of a blah conference where it wasn't very imaginative. And I really like Mark Cerny a lot, respect him a lot. But even his presentation of the console was very boring. Andrew House was very boring in presenting it. And I just felt that the charge wasn't there. Like, you really need this hardware because this hardware is really going to ramp up what you're already known with the PS4. To me, it was like, if you have money, a good amount of money, and you could afford a $2,000 TV, another $400 system, and maybe another $400 or new $400 VR headset, then by all means you should get this because you'll get an extra splash of paint on your screen. That was it. I didn't feel like this was a presentation saying, in order for you to keep enjoying great exclusive PS4 games, you really need to upgrade all these devices in order to enjoy this. It was more like, this is what we're having. You know, if you're interested in it, maybe pick it up down the road or this fall if you got the money. That's great. That was it. So I left that conference, at least to me, feeling that I have a PS4. I'm very happy with the PS4 I have. I'm not happy with the game selection. There could be a hell of a lot more games, easily. But as far as the console itself, I'm very happy with the specs in that PS4. I wish I saw more 1080p 60-frame games that weren't remasters, actual new original IPs that could reach those specs. Unfortunately, there's not too many of them. I'm hoping down the road there will be. Sony did indicate, and it was strange. They always do this after a conference. You hear details that you should have heard in the conference that was actually important, which was, from what I heard, I'm not sure if it's confirmed yet, through a firmware update, the PS4 can support HDR, the PS4 base model.
That's
so meaning
correct.
if you did invest in a 4K HDR TV, but you didn't want to invest in a Pro or a VR headset or this or that, you could still enjoy HDR graphics possibly down the road with the firmware update. That would have been nice to really emphasize at the conference so people aren't feel like they're getting left in the dark, basically, if you have a base model. So in closing with this, I thought the conference was very lackluster, very misdirected. The specs of the console were great, and from what I was told, from what I read, and from video reviews of people who were at the conference, they said you actually appreciated the specs a little bit more in person, but Sony wasn't able to stream it in 4K.
Right.
So everyone wasn't seeing the true quality. But even at that, the people that were there did say this was not an SD to HD jump. This was just a coat of paint that looked upscaled, basically. So even the motivation for the people that were actually there seeing it, it wasn't there. So it's interesting. What do you think?
And let me actually touch base on what you just mentioned too, because I feel like this is something that needs to be discussed. You just nailed it on the head. You said this was not an SD to HD bump up. And realistically, that's not what this generation has even been like. Right. When you look at visual leaps, and you talk about next gen or current gen, whatever you want to see it as at this point, because realistically, we'll always keep saying next gen when it's this gen.
Yeah.
You never see this insanely visual leap anymore. No. So when we went from PS1 to PS2, massive jump up. PS2 to PS3, massive jump up. From PS3 to PS4, we saw resolution differences. That's about, and high rendering models. That's about it.
Right.
And now we're talking about going from 1080p, which last I checked, I could have swore back in 2006, that's what my PS3 was supposed to be doing anyway.
Yep.
And going from 1080p to 4K. And yeah, that's a huge resolution difference. But it's not going to add a vastly different experience to your gameplay. Ultimately, the game you're playing is still going to be the same game you're playing. You're just going to get like an extra coat of paint or extra coat of lighting, however you want to see it, but it doesn't do anything that's leaps and bounds ahead. And nor was it ever supposed to. But this generation's already been kind of a joke in itself at several fields. In terms of visuals, yes, we have games that do look mind-blowing, something like Uncharted 4, for example. But when you're discussing about bringing 4K content, here's my rebuttal to both Sony and Microsoft with pushing their tech with 4K. Pump out games. Worry about putting out more games than putting out higher tech that raises the cost of production, that puts developers and publishers in this position where they're forced to put out remasters of previous games because they know that if they create a new IP and take a risk, games cost a fortune to make nowadays. Developers and publishers are not going to take those chances as much anymore because how many times have we seen in the last couple of years publishers and developers shutting down based on certain games that they release, and obviously their budgets were way too high. They never make that money back, and it's always going to be sold at a loss. So the developers and publishers are not going to be making the money that they invested into a game. You know, you see games like Destiny, which has a $500 million budget. And now, granted, that budget was not just for development, that was for marketing as well. Yeah. But, a game like Destiny ended up selling well, even though I think the game, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a fan of the game. But
neither was I.
I think I'm just going to flat out say I think that game sucked.
Yeah.
And I have various reasons that can back up why.
Only because it was hyped up for so long before the launch of a lot of things. They were talking about that for so long that I think it just built this hype and craze around it. And it felt pretty empty. But I haven't played it since the 50,000 updates and expansions it's had. But, it's a world of like kind of instant gratification. And if you don't get hooked on it in that first month, I don't think a lot of people would go back to it after, but I'm sure there is a following.
Oh, well, yeah, there's definitely a huge following. But I mean, this is besides the point. I'm just trying to stress, I'm getting a little off topic now. I'm just trying to connect it a bit. But all I'm saying is, they're talking about pushing this, they have this console coming out, and you got Microsoft now doing their jabs at Sony saying, oh, well, we've already got 4K out there now. It's $100 less, and we could play 4K Blu-ray movies on there too, which, by the way, that
was a whole nother
Sony could not be more ridiculous on not adding that in there because they're the company that pushed Blu-ray on the PS3.
They're the reason Microsoft, this was years ago, Sony sold rights so Microsoft could use the Blu-ray technology in their future systems, which that was about 6 years ago. Now we're seeing into fruition. The Xbox One S has that Blu-ray technology in it. The Xbox One has that Blu-ray technology in it. So the fact that Sony, who introduced this really and was the forefront of the back in the day of the HD Blu-ray fight, back then, the format wars, that they wouldn't have this in this console, the arrogance to assume that everybody just wants to stream and nobody wants to enjoy having a UHD disc collection and things like that. It's just, it's unthinkable that they did a move like this. And the only reason I know they did a move like this was to cut costs. They didn't want to have to pay for an optical drive in there. And they probably wanted to keep the system at a certain cost. But I'm sorry, if you want us to buy another console after 3 years of just releasing one, you should include all the bells and whistles in it. And Sony was ahead of the game up till this point. They were selling PS4s like hotcakes. So you can't tell me you didn't make enough money where you could have still sold it at $400 and included that Ultra Blu-ray drive in there. It just made no sense whatsoever to me. And it was a slap in the face to a lot of people there who wanted to upgrade with this Pro, take a leap after just investing just 3 years ago in a system. They were going to invest again for an Ultra HD collection, and now they won't be able to do that. It absolutely makes no sense.
Yeah, it's really just a slap in the face to themselves. It doesn't make any sense at all. It just, granted, now a lot of people were hoping that, were actually assuming. I mean, I think it was a safe assumption to think that Sony, the company that incorporated Blu-ray, has always incorporated these new formats in their consoles.
Yeah,
would put a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray player in their PS4 Pro, especially at the price point, so that it could actually play 4K movies.
Right.
They have gone beyond shooting themselves in the foot with this one.
Yeah.
And they really are naive to think otherwise. Because a lot of people are now going to see, well, hold up a second. So now I could just go buy an Xbox One S for $300 and get a 4K Blu-ray player out of there as well, which now makes that the cheapest Blu-ray player for 4K on the market. And Sony's touting about it being this Pro console, but it's forgetting one incremental element to have in there. Now,
Pro features. All I'm seeing is, we could do 4K. Well, that's great. It doesn't mean a whole lot to me, especially when your games they're not even promising that all these games will run at 60 frames a second, which is not even an excuse anymore. Yeah.
So, to me, the PS4 Pro is a massive, massive disappointment in terms of its announce, how it's being marketed. I think it's a big misstep and a big misfire, and I think Sony's going to see the repercussions of that in the coming year or so. So, which will probably put them back at the drawing board, if not already, and they're probably going to have to announce another updated console down the line. So,
I hope not.
The PS4 Super Pro.
Can't even joke about it because the way this generation's shown, it's definitely true. It's definitely true. I'm just disappointed because, again, this console, come, say, December, January, all of a sudden it could take off. And it could be very successful because it'll be the first one to introduce real 4K gaming for a console market until Scorpio next year. So it can do good, but just the way they're announcing it, the timing, and the specifications they're telling you need in order to really enjoy this is just, to me, ridiculous. I mean, you're telling me I need to get a $1,500 to $2,000 TV right off the bat. Then I need to buy a $400 system. Then I need to buy it's such a pricey proposition at a time where it's like, people might not be doing that well. So just support the people who already invested in your merchandise 3 years ago and make an extensive library. They're focusing more on console iterations than a library of games. So we have 3 different console iterations in just 3 years. We have a Slim, which is now going to be the regular, which is a horrendous-looking piece of hardware that apparently has overheating issues. We have the Pro, and then we have the regular PS4. And now they're releasing a whole new slew of accessories. So if you invested in a camera or the DualShock years ago, that's already getting thrown out of the way for a more improved of everything. Then you have the VR headset. It's just like we have more accessories than we do games. And sure as hell enough, definitely exclusive games. We have more accessories than exclusive games. So what is the thinking and the logic behind all this? I don't understand. I don't know if they were really waiting for 4K and now they'll start investing in first-party games and original IPs. But as of right now, my favorite game on the PS4 is Last of Us Remastered. And that's a PS3 game. So it just doesn't make sense. I don't know if it'll take off once the 4K TV market gets a little bit lower and more affordable for the average man to buy, an average gamer, average woman, whoever. But as of right now, it's just, to me, it's just such a pricey proposition that I'm just not jumping into that 4K market yet. I will wait till next year, see if the prices drop, and by then, Marcello, I already told you, I mean, most likely, depending on price, I would probably invest in the Scorpio over the Pro. There's just no way about it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's going to be neither one of them.
At this point.
I invested in a PS4 day one.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with it until, if it eventually breaks, then, or overheats, or whatever the case may be, if it has a similar issue with what the PS3 did back with the 60 gig model where it did yellow light.
Yellow light of death, yeah.
Should I come across a scenario like that with my PS4 model, then yeah, I'll probably get the Pro at that point. I'm not going to get a Slim because I'll get whatever's going to be better at that point, even if it's slight.
Right.
But like you said, there was nothing to showcase why I should get rid of what I have now to upgrade to an S. Well, we could call it an S model because we've joked around outside of podcasting, and you've stated it clearly that it's clear that Sony and Microsoft are doing Apple's method of doing S models. We release a device, and we're going to release an enhanced version of that same device.
Right.
And if that's the way the gaming generation is going to go, I mean, I still personally feel that this will be the final game, or the final generation. I don't think there's going to be another round of consoles, to be honest with you.
It's definitely possible, yeah.
And if it is, it won't be anything like what it has been. It'll be a very different idea altogether.
Yeah.
But, Sony is marketing this PS4 Pro. That's $400. They have the PlayStation VR coming out next month for $400.
Yeah.
What device are you trying to push for the holiday season? You can't tell me you're trying to push both a PS4 Pro and a VR headset at the same time for holiday season. No one has $800. Well, people have it, but no one is going to easily just spend a total of that kind of $800 to get this optimal experience.
You can't get that optimal experience. Don't forget besides those two devices, without getting a 4K TV, not just any 4K TV, a 4K HDR. And when you could get a base model 4K for a very affordable price nowadays, but a 4K HDR, and Sony's recommending 60 inches, which, by the way, 60 inches isn't a 30-inch TV. It's not a 40-inch TV. So you're recommending a 4K HDR 60-inch TV for the optimal experience. Okay, well, Sony, I'll be waiting for my check of $3,000 so I can invest in this. Your vision.
Yeah,
it's just tremendously insane to me. It's like when they released the PS3, the phenomenal price they released it at. It's just, you're asking, but that looks like peanuts now compared to what they're asking you. That's 3 times the figure now, more what they're asking you for the optimal of experience of some games in 4K 30 frames. Because I think, Marcello, you watched a video too of someone who was fortunate enough to be at this conference the other day. And even he said a lot of these games still weren't doing 4K 60 frames. Tomb Raider was trying to do 4K between 40 frames and maybe 50. Last of Us, I think, was doing 4K, and I forget the frame.
Native 4K, and that was always locked at 60 frames on the PS4. So
right, it's just you think with all those specs, every game is just off the bat going to be 4K 60 frames or higher. Because to be honest, if I'm paying that much, you would think even higher than 60. Some of these games can't even get 30, but they're getting 4K. So it's just, I think they jumped in too early, and the tech isn't there yet. And the tech that is there is way too pricey right now for the average consumer.
Right. I mean, I expected the PS4 Pro to have, aside from 4K, for me, it's about frame rate. If you're going to tell me that you can't get past the 30 frame mark, like, for example, Mass Effect Andromeda, they showed off gameplay footage of that, quote-unquote gameplay footage, just basically walking around.
Yes.
And, I mean, it's something. They finally showed a little bit more of it. But BioWare stated it will run at 30 frames on both the original model PS4 and the Pro. It's like, are you kidding me? Really? So, yeah, it's just... there's nothing there that made it seem like it's worth double dipping or trading in what you already have for this, unless you already have a 60-inch 4K HDR capable TV. Then, and only then, might I consider, okay, well then if that's the scenario I'm in, then I might have to consider it because I know it'll be tailored for that TV. Much like if we connect a basically an old school system such as, I don't know, the Dreamcast to an HDTV. Obviously, it's not going to look great unless we had upscaling tools.
Right.
So that being said, I think we covered our thoughts on the PS4 Pro.
Yep.
So really disappointed. Not going to sugarcoat it. I just don't see any beneficial elements in there that actually will enhance my game experience.
Right.
So I will happily stick with my original model, which I still think is the sleekest looking one of all of them. So that being said, we're going to shift over and we're going to discuss the other big announcement that was made just prior to the PS4 Pro's unveiling, which, Anthony, I think you and I can agree, this was, I think, more of a shock than anything else shown throughout the day.
Absolutely.
Was Apple's conference, and not that we're going to talk about the phone, or anything that was really unveiled tech-wise with the Apple conference, but more so the fact that it started off more or less within the opening minutes of Miyamoto taking the stage at an Apple conference to announce that Super Mario Run was coming to the iOS. And just the thought of Miyamoto taking stage at an Apple conference was very strange, but also pretty cool. Now, it comes as to no question that Nintendo has been trying to push a little bit more for mobile market now. They started off with Miitomo and partnered up with Niantic to release Pokemon Go, which has become a huge phenomenon around the world. So Nintendo knows that they want to get more involved into the mobile market because they can garner more viewers, more fans with different opportunities to access their content or anything of that sort through mobile devices. Right. So Miyamoto showing off Mario on the iPhone. Look, honestly, as weird as the thought was, it actually wasn't as weird seeing it running in action on the iPhone. It was just kind of synonymous for me to see because of the type of game it was as well. It's going to be a runner, and that's a very famous gameplay style for the mobile market because it's easy to just access, pick up, and play. You don't have to have two hands on there, holding your device to play, really. You can just do it with one hand. So, Anthony, what were your thoughts on Super Mario Run being announced, Miyamoto being there with with Bill Trinen? What were your emotions going at that moment?
Well, first of all, it was strange. It was different to see. It wasn't expected. Apple is in its own league. It's in its own world. And to see him there, to see Nintendo there on that stage was just very surreal. But once they started showing off the game, I said, you know what? I could actually see this as a whole untapped market of people that grew up playing Nintendo and are now playing, to me, this is going to come off biased, but just boring iPhone games that I would have no interest in playing. They're going to get a splash of what their youth was. They're going to get to play some Nintendo games they probably haven't played in, some of those people, 20, 30 years or more, because they left console gaming years ago. So for them, it's going to be an untapped market to go back to their childhood, play something that's quick, fun, pick up. And I believe the version is free, and then there'll be some tiny little add-ons. But I think Nintendo is strong in saying they're not going to be a microtransaction company for the mobile market. There might be some add-ons, but it won't be as notorious as some other companies where every little thing costs an extra price. But I think it's just weird for me still to see Mario on anything but a Nintendo handheld or a Nintendo home console. And to see him on an iPhone, I feel like it could be a slippery slope where down the road I fire up my X1 and I'm going to see Mario on my Xbox dashboard or on my PlayStation.
Actually, now that you mentioned it, that was something else we should quickly bring up. I don't know if you're aware that apparently on the Windows Store for Xbox One, it got a Nintendo emulator got approved, and right now there's currently a Nintendo emulator you can download on your Xbox One.
I did hear something of that, but I know none of the details. So you're saying you can play an original Nintendo on the X1 now?
From what I'm hearing and understanding, it seems like that's basically out there for anybody to grab before it gets pulled somehow.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, you guess you could play Mario on your Xbox, which sounds really dirty just to say.
Yeah, just the whole thought of playing Mario anywhere but on a Nintendo, it's just very, very foreign and strange.
It is.
And for people that are younger than us, to them it'll be like no big thing. But if you literally grew up when the Nintendo came out, when the Super Nintendo came out, it's going to be foreign to you. But I think we're all going to secretly download it and play it on our iPhones.
Oh, I already hit the notify me button on the App Store for that. Are you kidding me?
Yes, I think they will make a ton of money. It will be hugely successful. It'll probably maybe surpass Pokemon. And it's just going to be a big deal. But it did feel a little dirty at first when we heard about it.
Meanwhile, I was expecting, as soon as they had Miyamoto take the stage, I'm like, could you imagine that this would be the NX reveal, that they're partnering up with Apple instead of, like, I know there's been reports that they've been partnering up with NVIDIA Shield's tablet device or architecture and the company themselves to try to get that kind of architecture for the NX, apparently, even though we still don't know what it is. But I was wondering if, at that point, I'm like, watch it be an announcement with Apple that they're releasing a home console in tandem with Apple. That would be the NX.
Would be amazing. Yeah.
It would have been a pretty mind-blowing thing to see.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have been the first time that Nintendo would have partnered up with a company in that respect, because if we all recall back to the PlayStation 1 N64 era and Super Nintendo era, like that whole 90s era, let's put it that way, Nintendo and Sony were working together to create the Nintendo PlayStation.
Yeah.
But Nintendo bailed out. They weren't crazy about the idea after development was already well underway, and that's what gave the birth of the Sony PlayStation at that point, and Nintendo going with the N64.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think honestly, Super Mario Run will be a fun game to have on the iOS. Now, what I want to know is, what do you think this might mean for Nintendo if they're partnering up with Apple to release iOS games? Do you think that means, well, let's not overthink it, but
no, I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, it mean trouble for Nintendo, or does it just mean that they really want to, they honestly and genuinely just want to reach a bigger market, seeing that if they can partner up with Apple and have some of their smaller titles, as I'd like to call it, releasing on iOS, that it might help boost sales and boost publicity more for Nintendo, even with the NX releasing come March?
I think it's a mix of things. I think, yes, they realize their traditional market is successful, but not as successful as it could be because of the mobile market. And I think Nintendo was just coming late to the game in certain things after the Wii U, and they realized that maybe they were late with some aspects and didn't recognize the potential of the mobile market or the HD market. And now they're starting to realize that, and they're going to cash in on titles that made them, at this point, probably billions of dollars. And now they're going to explore that untapped market with their licensed material. And their licensed material trumps, I think, anything that was created at the Apple Store, just because Nintendo always says that they have that magic secret, that potion, whatever it is, that it puts a twinkle in everybody's eye. And people could put down the Wii U, they could put down Nintendo. But when you think of Donkey Kong, you think of Mario, you think of all these great titles from years ago, you don't even remember the Uncharted or Gears of War or any of this stuff that's come up in the last 10 years. You just think about the true classics.
Right, and that's what they are.
And that's what they are, and they're timeless. And I always said this, and I said this on a podcast we did years ago, PlayStation and Microsoft's games have a shelf life. They definitely have a shelf life. Nintendo's games are timeless. You could fire up a game from 85 and be completely enthralled with it. They will never have a shelf life of 5 years or 10 years. They don't expire. Nintendo makes games that last across generations, where the other two haven't been able to create that kind of thing. It might be a generation or two, but that's it. Nintendo could span 30 years or more. And that's phenomenal. So they're in their own league when it comes to that and what they create.
And that's the thing, too. I mean, we have the PS4 Pro coming out this holiday season. Microsoft has their Xbox One S out that came out in August, and it's going to be what they're going to be pushing for this holiday season.
Right.
And Nintendo, while they don't have an NX, they're putting out, aside from their 3DS XLs and the new 3DS and all that stuff, which, I mean, 3DS is just selling like hotcakes no matter what, because it's got games that people want.
Right.
But Nintendo's going to be pushing out a console that is timeless, and I feel like is going to be a better seller than the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One S. And honestly, that's the NES Mini Classic Edition console.
Yeah.
And it's just stating the fact that you just said it back in '85. You could pop in a game from 1985, sit down, play it, and still enjoy it over 30 years later. You know, it says a lot.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's something I'm excited for. Even if I have most of those games as virtual console through the Wii or Wii U, or a lot of them at least, I'm still going to want that piece of hardware because, to me, that's more iconic and that's more about what gaming is all about.
Yeah. It's really the start of gaming.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you want to really go back further, we can say the Atari, the Intellivision, but realistically, what saved the video game market and the reason why the video game market is even where it is now is because of Nintendo.
Yeah.
So, that being said, yeah, I think it was awesome altogether seeing Nintendo take the stage. I still personally cannot wait for the NX to be unveiled to the public. I still think it's supposed to be this month. Realistically, they have to unveil the NX this month because it's 6 months prior to launch. They cannot wait any sooner.
I think it will be the most exciting. I think it will be the most exciting launch, especially compared to what we just saw with this PlayStation conference. I really feel that this will be an exciting conference. Nintendo is going to make up for basically what happened with the Wii U and just kind of the way it kind of slugged to an end. And this is going to be, they're promising something so different. And the one thing you got to give to Nintendo is sometimes they'll have little leaks, but they never have the huge leaks. We still have no idea what this system is going to look like. All we have is concept art that leaked and may have leaked or may have been falsified. We have no clue what this thing looks like. So I know that Microsoft and Sony are just so on edge because they have no clue what kind of tech Nintendo is going to show. It's a hybrid. It could be a health console mixed with a gaming console mixed with a handheld console. I mean, it's just going to throw the market for a loop when Nintendo NX gets unveiled.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think there's been more excitement to hear about what Nintendo has to show off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, awesome. That being said, next thing we're going to bring up is something that I mentioned earlier a bit. So, the Dreamcast. Yesterday was 9/9, and it was the 17th birthday in North America for the Sega Dreamcast.
Yes.
A much beloved console that really just never had much of a chance after its 2-year lifespan.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean a whole lot since everybody still, whoever had the console, loved the console. Now, Anthony, I know that you had the console since, more or less since launch, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's actually talk about it. Let's actually discuss the Dreamcast. It's 17 years old as of yesterday here in North America. And while it's an odd number or whatever, it's not that we're celebrating a 15th or 20-year anniversary yet. Let's discuss just some memories to look back at what it was all about 17 years ago.
Taking you back 17 years ago, I was on the search and going crazy and sending my parents with me. We were driving to every Toys R Us back then. No Best Buy was around, at least in my area. And I was searching for not a Dreamcast, a PlayStation 2. And I wanted it. The commercials were enticing, and I was going crazy. And the logo, the system, everything was just so sleek and sexy and vibrant about it. It was just, I wanted that PS2. And in my mind back then, it was probably we were looking for it for years when it was only a couple of weeks probably. And we were just searching every store. PS2 was sold out everywhere. And every time I would go to the store, I would notice there was this other system being pushed, and it was Dreamcast. And I'm noticing the collection of games. And then I'm starting to play at friends' houses, and I'm playing games like Crazy Taxi and House of the Dead and Resident Evil. And I'm just saying, like, these graphics are insane. They're beautiful. The system's so futuristic. It's so advanced. It has a controller with a memory card that has its own TV screen, that has its own portable games when you pull out the memory card. I'm coming from the PS1, which now looks like a dinosaur, and crappy little cartridges for the memory cards. I would get corrupted data.
The infamous corrupted data.
And it's just like, now I'm seeing this system's got a memory card that has its own TV screen with its own mini games you could pull out when you turn the system off. And I'm saying, and they're talking about playing online, and it's connected with Windows CE at the time, and it comes with this Ethernet cable or dial-up cable, which I didn't know what that was back then. Because I was still in a house where you needed the internet. You tell everyone to get off the phone, and you unplug that line and put it into another line, and you had AOL dial-up. But it was just so amazing. So one day at Toys R Us, it was actually Kids World. It was a major Toys R Us. I decided instead of the PS2, I really want this Dreamcast because this console already has at least 5 to 10 games I want already, and I've seen in action. Whereas the PS2 at that time really had nothing out, and it wasn't a great selection, for me at least. So I got the Dreamcast at Christmas. I got Code Veronica. I got House of the Dead 2. I got the Sonic game. I had Crazy Taxi. I mean, I had all these, to me, amazing games.
You had this awesome launch lineup right there.
I had all pretty much AAA games, and I had a gun peripheral for House of the Dead, and it was just... when I fired up Resident Evil Code Veronica, being a Resident Evil fan since the PS1 days, and actually my first Resident Evil was on Sega Saturn, Resident Evil 1. I was just... Saturn. Resident Evil 1, and I was blown away by Code Veronica's graphics. I was blown away by the game and what this console could produce, because coming from a 64 and PS1, this was a huge jump in graphics, the polygons, everything. The way it ran, the system itself was so sleek and tiny, and it was just such an amazing system.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean...
It was just amazing.
In 99, when that thing released, it was way ahead of anything else. Like you mentioned, the VMUs. So you plug in this visual memory unit into the Dreamcast controller, and here you had this little tiny screen, but it could showcase certain things based on what you're playing. It could even be something as simple as just the game's logo to something like, I believe you said in Code Veronica, it would show your health.
Right. Code Veronica would actually display the health. And I think when you were getting attacked, it would kind of display. I pretty much remember it was a zombie sequence, maybe, of a zombie on the screen. Don't quote me on it, because this is many years ago. I haven't fired up Code Veronica on the Dreamcast in a long time, but it all worked together. It was like its own ecosystem between the memory card, the console, and the game.
Right.
And you're playing the Dreamcast now, I believe.
I am.
Because you bought it later in life.
I did. So I waited almost 17 years to eventually own a Dreamcast. So I bought one back in March, and I've been... I think it says a lot that I bought this console about 16 and a half years after it released in North America.
Right.
And I've been so much more excited searching for games that were on this console, getting some games that I could try to find for cheap, and firing up these games that were just about having fun. And honestly, it says a lot. I mean, I picked up a console. It was almost like new condition. The games that I ended up getting, I bought it from somebody on eBay. I bid for it. I won it last second.
Wow.
I got it for like $80, or $85, something like that. And the guy was mentioning how it was an adult-owned console, very well taken care of. And I noticed from the pictures, it still looked white. It didn't get that yellowish time differentiation with something that's white. Usually gets discolored to a yellow if it's not taken care of because of dust and stuff like that. The thing was still in brand new condition. Came with 2 controllers. Came with 2 memory cards. It came with the jump packs, 2 of those, and it came with like 25 games. I was like, for $80 or 80 and change, I'm like, I can't go wrong. This is awesome.
Absolutely.
And it was exciting. I got to hook it up, and I'm popping in all these older games. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to look up some other games I'm curious that I might have missed out on during the Dreamcast era. So here I was looking online, picking up some games like Rippin' Riders, which was like a Cool Borders spiritual successor from the PS1, Extreme Sports, because I'm just a nut for any extreme sports type of game. I was popping in Tony Hawk 1 and 2 because that came with my bundle that I ended up winning, and just having fun with those, just some slightly upgraded graphics from the PS1 64 versions. And then I just started coming across more that I wanted to pick up that were relatively within a reasonable price range. And I remember looking up Spawn, for example, for the Dreamcast, because that was a Dreamcast exclusive. And then looking for games like 18 Wheeler, like I said, Crazy Taxi, and then some other gems like Tokyo Extreme Racer, Sports Jam, Star Wars Jedi Power Battles, like all these different games. And I just started getting excited again looking for games. And I just can't seem to get that same excitement this current generation. And it's just funny. I think it's a testament that I miss my games being simple, fun, vibrant looking.
Yeah.
And it just says a lot. And even though VMU, to this day, so the Wii U has a gamepad and can replicate what's happening exactly on the TV screen at in a 540p resolution.
Right.
And to this day, that still blows my mind.
Yeah, it was so ahead of its time with that.
So, the Dreamcast had something very basic compared to that, but for $19.99, there was nothing else that did that.
Yeah.
And like you said, those online gaming too. Now, yes, you had to run that wire across a kitchen, across stairs, outside
Wrap
the
it
house,
around your parents,
across somebody's house, across the street, and hook it up, and then listen to the infamous dial tone go off and hope that nobody is on the phone or whatnot.
But the point is, they tried. Sega was really, really trying to be as innovative as possible, and I really felt if it was more the right timing in the market and there wasn't as many things coming out, I felt that could have stuck around a lot longer. But it just shows a testament to the system. In the time it was on the market, look at the impact it left. After Dreamcast went away, so many people wanted to work with Sega and have Sega develop original games for their consoles, whether it was Sony or any of the other companies. Everyone took cues from the Dreamcast. Everyone, PS2 put an online component in their system. They were all taking cues. So everyone took ideas from that Dreamcast. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Unfortunately, I think the original Xbox tried to take the Dreamcast controller and put it on more steroids, and it became this ugly Goliath-looking mess. But it just proves that everyone was trying to take some kind of aspect from that Dreamcast and put it in their system for the next, I would say, at least 5 years after, almost. And still till today, you mention the Dreamcast, you go on Twitter, people are talking about the 17th birthday of Dreamcast. It's a system that left such an impact that it's still being felt today. And people are still burning ROMs of games that they want to play of Dreamcast games. It just shows. It was something special at the time, and I'm so glad I still own it. And to mention what you said, it's a little detail, but I have my Super Nintendo since 91 till now, and yes, it did stain that yellow, even if I kept it in perfect condition. That Dreamcast, whatever plastic they used, it's still bright white. It's a brilliant white, and the console fires up like you would swear it's 2000 again. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
It really is. And like I said, I just got onto the Dreamcast scene late, but that's also because I've been really yearning to come back to some older games. Because honestly, a lot of the newer stuff is just not doing it for me anymore.
Right.
But that being said, like even I found the Dreamcast fan site called Dreamcast Junkyard. Awesome site if you're a Dreamcast fan, by the way. Really cool stuff. They've got some really cool podcasts to also check out. I believe they're called the Dreamcast Junkyard Dream Pod. So definitely something else to check out if you're a fan of Dreamcast stuff. But it just shows that there's a community still alive for this console that just, even though it only got a 2-year lifespan, I think it says a lot that 17 years later, like you said, it still shows the impact that it left on the industry in just a matter of 2 years that it was out.
Easily.
So I think it says a lot.
Yeah. So. And I'm so glad you purchased it, because I'm telling you, it was something that I think everyone should have been able to play that before they got their PS2 or their original Xbox or their GameCube. Whatever it was, I just wish everyone could have gotten a chance to play Dreamcast. Right.
Like even, I remember during Easter time, I only had the Dreamcast for maybe a month, if even. And I had just got 18 Wheeler on there.
Great game. I have it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a good game. It's short, but it's arcade fun. You can't go wrong.
Right.
And my nephew had come over for Easter, and he was big into Euro Truck Simulator on the PC. So I had him playing 18-wheeler. And I still won't forget. Now, he's playing it. I mean, he grew up with the PS3 era of gaming. That's where he really kicked in, was the Wii PS3 era.
Right.
But he's a teenager, and he gets where gaming came from. I taught him well. Let's put it that way.
He was schooled in the fine arts before.
He was playing the PS2 at like the age of 2.
He understands this isn't the best generation right now.
But he even told me he was playing 18-wheeler. He was having a lot of fun with it, and he even said to me, had he been around during the Dreamcast era, that would have been his console he would have definitely got, because those other games on there he would have loved to play.
Wow.
So I think it says a lot. Again, it shows that it had an impact.
Right.
But yeah, that being said, Dreamcast turned 17 yesterday. Who knows? I guess 3 years from now, maybe we'll be doing a 20th anniversary podcast on the Dreamcast. Who knows? But
it's very possible.
Very possible. It's still going to be making an impact 3 years from now, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
That being said, last thing we'll probably touch base on is just our personal game deals of the week. Last time we did our first episode, we mentioned our game deals, where we mentioned that Doom was on sale for $20, which was a steal. As well as, I remember you mentioning Last of Us was on sale at Walmart for like $13.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Oh, great deal.
So this episode, game deals that we came across, our personal game deal of the week, each one of us. Anthony, what's your personal game deal of the week that you spotted?
My personal game deal that I spotted was, funnily enough, Doom again. And this time it was Doom the Collector's Edition. And it was on sale on Amazon this week, X1 and PS4, for $40 and some on change. Now, I'm not familiar what the Collector's Edition actually comes with, but the fact that you could get a Collector's Edition for $40 when the retail game was $60 just a couple of weeks ago is pretty impressive. Now, Marcello, you've played the game. You enjoyed it a lot.
Yes. I think I made that pretty clear during the game deals segment in episode 1. Yeah, Doom was one of the better, if not one of the best first-person shooters released this console generation, due to the fact that it really took what made Doom so special back in the 90s, and it took that and it modernized it, but not overly so. It modernized it just enough where it still feels like the old ones, but with a little bit more of a faster pacing and a little bit more of a brutality to it.
Right.
But it was a brilliantly put together game, honestly. Definitely one of my favorite games this year.
So for $40 and to get the collector's edition, which I'm sure comes with some sort of DLC, it's definitely worth it, and you'd recommend it.
Oh, absolutely. It was worth it for $20, but I mean, for $40, it's a collector's edition. If you don't mind having the statue of one of the creepy enemies that has a jetpack on them that shoots rockets.
Yes. Yeah.
Totally worth it, honestly. Still is.
Yeah.
And then my personal game deals, I mean, I'm torn between two of them, so I'll mention both of them.
Okay.
I noticed that Street Fighter V Collector's Edition for the PS4 which used to be $100, is down to about in the $40 range on Amazon, and the standard edition is down to in the low 20s. The game came out back in February, obviously, to much mixed reception due to the fact that there just wasn't a whole lot of content in the game.
Right.
But Capcom, shockingly, when the game was discussed last year, they stated that any future DLC in the game would all be added via patch updates, and it would always be free additional content. They were not charging for additional content. So they have added several things. They've added a story mode. They've added new characters, new modes. So by now, at that price point, yeah, it's a little bit more content heavy this time around.
Yeah.
So definitely might be worth giving a look. And the other one
Absolutely.
the other one I spotted was my game of the year last year, which was Bloodborne.
Yes.
For a measly $13 and change on Amazon. If you have not played Bloodborne yet, really, really should.
And for that price, even if you're not sure it's your genre of gaming, check it out. It's $13. You know, there's definitely store titles that we've purchased that were more and were crap. So this is a AAA game. It was your PS4 game of the year.
Oh, easily. It's not my favorite PS4 game still to date.
Right.
And and yes, I know that Uncharted 4 is out.
Yeah. Well, listen, that's not my favorite PS4 game to date. I stated it earlier in the podcast, so I could definitely believe Bloodborne was yours.
It was the one I played the most out of any other on the console.
And I think people should definitely give it a chance for $13. If you don't like it, it was $13.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's $13. It's so worth it. Could not recommend it more. But that being said, I think we're going to wrap up the podcast. I think that'll end it for episode 2. So,
Absolutely.
Anthony, thank you for being on again today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And stay tuned for episode 3 in the near future.
See you later, guys.
Take it easy and game on.